is this thing? Yes, it is. Radio presenter voice time. Well, good morning, everyone here in the room and everyone that's joining us online. We have two very tough acts to follow after the very inspiring conversations that we had this morning. But we have a very interesting panel and we have a star-studded lineup of panelists. I don't know if you were familiar with the report that the International Labour Organization published last week on female access to work. But that report that's hot off the presses said that there's around a 20 or 25% gap on access to work between men and women, which is terrible, and we need to work on that. But that becomes even more present when we think about the C-suite, the boards, and the leadership of the companies that we all participate in, which is the purpose of this panel. So we will learn from these amazing three leaders. I will not do justice to their introduction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with you, Lorianne, and ask you to introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself, your journey, where you work, and what you do.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lorianne Diaz, but my friends call me LA. I am the Vice President of Business Communications and Social Responsibility for your Miami Heat. I am a 305 girl, born and raised. Thank you. Thank you. It is season 24 with the Miami Heat and season 25 in the NBA. I started my career when I was still living out in Los Angeles, working for the Clippers before they were the reputable organization that they are today. This is my fifth position with the organization. I started out as a marketing assistant, and all these years later, just kind of kept climbing the ladder. Really happy to be here today to talk shop with you all, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for being with us, Madelka.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. I am also very happy to be here, surrounded by this woman, a wonderful woman. I'm sure we're going to learn a lot. I'm also very pleased to have a male moderator because as we were discussing before, it's important that they are part of the conversation. So I'm Madelka Macala. I am originally from Panama. Everything that I'm going to tell you now, it's relevant for whatever I'm going to answer later. So I'm originally from Panama. I am the youngest from three sisters. So you can imagine what does to someone when you're growing up. You develop special skills in negotiation and persuasion when you have to compete for attention, which is also useful or is being useful in my career. At the core of who I am, I have my values and which are self-respect, humility, respect for others, discipline, and persistence. And something that is very important to me as well is self-care. So I place high value on mental and physical health, which is something that we normally don't discuss as much as leaders, right? But that's also very important. I am the Chief Corporate Affairs and Impact Officer at AES. It's a global energy company, operates in about 13 markets, and we are supporting customers and countries decarbonize and achieve their sustainability goals. And I do this based out of Washington, D.C. or Arlington, Virginia, those are the headquarters of the company. And with this new role, because it's a new role that was created just to make sure that we help accelerate the energy transition, I lead the corporate communications, stakeholder relations, and impact teams.
Thank you, Madelka. Alejandra, welcome.
Thank you. Well, first of all, good morning, everybody. It's very nice to be here, surrounded by such talented and inspiring women and men too. My name is Alejandra. I'm the managing director of CMPC USA. CMPC, it's a paper and pulp company. We're in the forest industry. Our headquarters are in Chile, and we have our office and our operations in Atlanta, Georgia. That's where I live. I've been there for 6 years already, almost 10 years in the company, and out of those 10 years, 6 years I've been in Atlanta, so I can call that home. I'm married. I have a good mix. My mother is American. My father is Chilean. I'm Chilean. So now I'm leaving the States. So it's kind of the dream come true from my mother. She can come every year without any more excuses to visit me. And I think that at CMPC, it's a company that we export our products to over 50 countries around the world. I've been having different positions. I started in Chile more on the logistics side, and I've been switching into into different roles in finance, administration, and also operations. So last year I was appointed as the MD of the office, first woman being appointed that in the company in the States. So I'm very, very honored and I feel a great responsibility for that. So yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you for being with us, Alejandra and Madelka and LA. Coolest name ever. You are all very powerful, inspiring female leaders that have worked extensively in your sectors and in your companies. And when we were chatting just before the panel, it became blatantly obvious that you work or lead predominantly male-dominated boardrooms. How do you manage that? Maybe we'll start with you, Lorianne.
With a lot of patience, with a stress ball. Look, we're still not even as we've made strides in all of the years that I've been at the Heat. I can still look out around the company and say to myself, we still have more work to do. I don't know that we're ever going to be 50-50 in terms of like gender split, but we've definitely made progress over the years. I know that there's a very strong network of women, especially like at the, let's say, directors, VP, executive VP, senior VP level. And we are each other's allies. We have each other's backs because we know what it's like to have our voices drowned out. And so there's a very kind of intentional effort put into, if I'm going to make a point in a meeting with like executive leadership, I usually go to one of my allies and I say, I'm going to make this point and I need you to follow up after it to help me kind of reinforce it, whatever the topic or the point is. And I have found that to be very effective. It's not easy though, especially in men's sports. But I will say that I'm very happy and proud of my league because it is the league out of all the men's professional sports leagues. I think that score is pretty high on diversity. So it makes me really proud to work in a league that is very hyper aware of that and is very active in again going out and recruiting and making sure that our offices and our teams look like the communities that we serve.
Just to follow up on that one, what would make it easier?
Well, if I had that answer, I mean, definitely I would be remiss if I didn't say allyship. You know, obviously, my supervisor, who is our executive vice president and chief marketing officer, Michael McCullough, he is, we have a great relationship. I call him my work husband because we've been side by side for 24 years. It's one of the longest relationships of my life. And I have to say, he is very much a cheerleader and an advocate. And that's really important too. I think it's forging those relationships, not just obviously as a woman with the women in my office, but with the men too.
Brilliant. Thank you. Madelka, how about yourself? How do you manage that?
Well, I think I manage it by being a woman, right? There is this vision that, you know, because you work in a male-dominated environment, you have to compete. You have, I guess, part of my success throughout my career has been, you know, walking in and just being a woman, right? And that has brought me, I think, to where I am. And it's also part of that education that needs to happen, right? Men need to start valuing us for what we bring to the table. It's not because we're going to speak louder. It's not because we're going to, you know, it's because we add something. And it's not always easy. I have to say, throughout my career, I agree with you. We don't have the answer, but by being a woman, I also know that you need to be mindful and know when to ask for help. And throughout that path, I found wonderful mentors, mostly men, by the way, mostly men, who have guided me through my career. And I believe that because I've been so lucky, I have the responsibility to pass that on to other people. And so I agree that allyship is important, mentorship is important, but also what do we do once we get that chance, which is to bring along other people around the organization to be advocates for those people when they are not in the room. And like that, little by little, we're going to be able to manage that. And I think it was Tito who mentioned intentionality. I work for the energy sector, so we can speak about a lot of reports. IRENA is one of them that speaks about the opportunities that the renewable sector is going to create for women, but nothing is going to change if we're not intentional by design, like when we do the design of our projects and our programs. And just to give you a quick example, we have the first renewable wind park in Brazil is called Tucano, 100% operated by women, but that is coming with intentionality in a male-dominated environment. So I'm just going to leave it like that. It's not easy, but at least we need to try.
Thank you, Malik.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more that it's not easy. But I think that the way I try to see it is that being a woman, it's more, for me, it's more like a strength rather than a weakness. I think that there's beauty on that. I mean, I'm the different one in a boardroom. I'm the one with different point of views. I'm the one who have many different ways of things of approaching life. So I try to use that as a good thing and how I approach different conversations. And I couldn't agree more with Madelka when she says about the stereotypes. I think that we need to be a woman. We need to be close to people. We need to have that empathy that maybe defines us, and try to fit into a male role. I think it's not the solution. I think that bringing that diversity, it's what adds more value for us. So and to build also on what they were saying before, I think that we need to push for these conversations to be on the agenda. We need to be more intentional on how on creating that awareness. If I enter a room, or if I go to a panel or a forum and I see that there's just one woman sitting there, I made a comment between the teams like, look, there's just one woman over there. Why is that? And try to create that awareness on people that might not be looking into that all the time. And I intentionally try to create that awareness in myself. Not only maybe I have that more close for a woman standpoint, but for other minorities, I think it's important to understand and try to see things through the lens of gender equality or gender parity. So that's how I try to approach it.
Thank you, Alejandra. You've really mentioned how you, as women, manage this in boardrooms, but you also have the privilege of having a bird's eye view of your organizations when it comes to DE&I, right? Maybe I'll start with you, Alejandra. In maybe an example from your company, or what would you say are those must-haves that we should all be striving for in our organizations for us to actually live truly into what diversity, equity, and inclusion mean?
Yeah, well, I've been part of a group called Power of Women. We initially started being 40 women in the organization, 40 executives, and I think nowadays we are more than 300. And the company has set up goals, very ambitious goals in this respect. On 2019, for example, when we started with this, there was only, I think, around 14% of women in leadership roles. The goal for 2025, if we get up to 30%, and I think last year we closed in around 24, so almost 9% extra from 2019. And why I'm saying that, it's because I think that we put that into the agenda. We committed to something, and we are having those conversations. And I think the key thing is what we all been talking about a lot. It's about the allies and the sponsors. We need to have more people making decisions that supports women. Hopefully one day those women will be the ones making those decisions. But nowadays we need those allies. We cannot do this on our own. So that's key for me.
Thank you, Alejandra. Madelka, what about yourself?
Well, I think for organizations now, you spoke about the birth view. I would say there are three things. One is authentic representation, and I'm using the word authentic because just by saying that you have diversity and you're checking a box, that's not gonna cut it. You really need to make sure that those voices are represented and are part of the discussion. Then you need equitable opportunities. Something similar like the example that I just made about Brazil. You need to make sure that there is equal pay, equal rights for women, that you kind of promote that inside of the organization. And then the third one, which is not less important, is promote this culture of inclusion. We spoke about that. We spoke about this morning the importance of having ERGs and all these groups, but all that starts at the top. I'll have to say that I'm very proud to work for a company where our CEO is setting the tone about that culture. Then you have the chief human resources officer that is also making sure that we have the resources to do that. So having a dedicated DEI officer to make sure that those things are happening and it's not just, a sexy term or a political term.
Tick in the box exercise.
Yeah, exactly. So make sure that we're walking the talk, and it's very hard. You said metrics, and we all have metrics, but it's really the mindset and having people inside of the organization that truly believe that this could happen. And the last thing that I would say is that if you really believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion, you will see the benefits, running down to your business. You will see how much innovation you can bring, how much you can solve difficult problems. I would say at AS, there's not a single problem that we haven't solved. It's just because of that uniqueness, the diversity that we have that help us thrive in any environment, and regardless of how complicated things are.
And there are some hard numbers to support that fact, right? Like, so when you in fact implement DNI
Yeah.
structurally, there comes business growth. There's data that's public that's available for all of us to look at that.
There is data, there are programs, and I'm just going to give you, because I did speak about equitable opportunities. I can give you another example. We have, in this sector, we also have customer service, right? And normally the people that participate in or are working in customer service, they don't have degrees that could help them get to different positions. So we have something that is called Powerful Pathways at AS, where we accelerate the learning of certain people of a group, and surprisingly enough, in our utilities, mostly female of color have participated in that program. And now after you go through that program, then you get placed at a different, probably administrative position, and then there you go, right? Then you have to prove yourself and get other opportunities. So there are metrics, there are programs, there is that intention. We also have a very diverse board. We are very happy about that. It's work in progress, but still, like, since you have that tone set up at the top, then the rest would just follow.
Leaders set the tone all
Yeah.
the time. LA, how about yourself?
So what I would say is, in my industry, it's very simple. It's visibility. And I say that as a woman who has a trifecta going. I am a woman, I'm Latina, and I'm a lesbian, and I work in men's professional sports. When I was growing up, even though I was an athlete, I never knew that there were front office opportunities. It's like that didn't compute for me back in I'll date myself, back in the 80s. And it's for that reason that I do panels a lot with some high schools, with colleges, because it's important, I think, especially for women, to see themselves reflected, in a professional sports organization at the highest level. Just because first of all, back in the day, again, there wasn't social media, it was harder. But I think now, in my mind, there's no reason for me not to come and do things like this and participate, things that are streamed online, because it's important, again, for people to see there are front office jobs for women. And just because it's professional sports doesn't mean you're not welcome there. I can't speak for every team in every professional sports league, but I can speak on behalf of the NBA, and specifically on behalf of the Heat. Those three things, the trifecta, they help, and they are embraced, and they're welcomed. So I would say visibility, in addition to obviously intentionality and everything that these ladies mentioned.
Thank you for that. What I love most about these answers is that they come from personal experiences that you've all had at some point in your career. You've worked very hard in your industries. You've opened pathways for yourselves, for others. I'm sure you have a treasure trove of anecdotes in this journey. Would you feel comfortable sharing any nice, nasty, whatever you prefer? Would you like to go first, Nautica?
Sure. Oh boy. Okay. So we're just talking about this before the panel, and I think first I'll start with a confession, and then I'll tell you a little story. But I never intended to work for an energy company, right? I actually I started my career working at the UN, and I said, well, I want to save the world and work for an organization that has impact. That's my whole thing. I want to make sure that I have a positive impact on society and people around me. So I ended up taking this job because as I was interviewing for the UN, I was always asked one question. Do you have experience working in Africa? I really wanted to be part of a peacekeeping operation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. That was my thing after being part of the UN Security Council. So interview after interview, my answer was no. So when I met my first boss at AES, she asked me, but why do you want to go to DRC? Why don't you come and work for us in Cameroon? And in my mind, I said, okay, I'm going to say yes to this, because if I say yes, then when they ask me the question, I'll be able to say, yes, I do have experience working in Africa. So I took that job. Fast forward 13 years, I'm still working for AES, working for a great company that, you know, is giving me that opportunity to impact communities and people around me. And my first job being in Cameroon, something very, very, very short, simple that happened to me that changed the way how I actually positioned myself at work. It was this little story. I was leading the corporate social responsibility department, and I had to do a lot of community meetings, right? And in Cameroon, it's a society that is male dominated, very male chauvinist, and there's a cultural difference, right? So I go to my first meeting with this chief, village chief, and you still call them Your Majesty. And as I'm sitting down there, before we go, one of the senior leaders say, make sure you bring someone with you. And I said, okay, I'm going to bring the person responsible for community engagement. So it was a he. He comes with me. We get to the village house, the chief village, and then I'm starting to communicate about the program. And he, as I'm telling him something, he tells my colleague, tell her that, well, first time. Then I tell him, and this triangle went on for like, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes, three questions. I had the same thing. And I said, okay, well, that's fine. Maybe he's doing that because I'm new, I'm not from here. So I went back a second time. And this time I didn't bring my colleague. I went by myself. I walk in, and then he does the same thing with my driver. And I said, okay, well, then it's not, what is it? So the third time, you know what I did? Guess what I did? I went back with a woman. And I said, well, now you're not going to have a choice. You're going to have to talk to either one of us. But the reason why I'm telling you this story is because when I went back, I realized that he wasn't discriminating me because I was Black, because we're both Black. He was discriminating me because I was a woman, right? He was not. And then I thought, he's not really discriminating you. He just doesn't know how to deal in this environment in a different way, because women are probably, you know, meant to be doing other things. And what that taught me is that I have to get rid of all those mental barriers, because just like you, where do I start? Where do I begin? Like, I'm Black, I'm Latina, I'm a woman. I mean, you need to, at some point, get rid of those mental barriers. Yes, you're going to face some barriers in your career, but if you add to that your mental barriers, then it's game over. So that little story taught me very early on in my career that if I work so hard to prepare myself, I was prepared. I prepared so hard. It was one of my first meetings. And then you are going to encounter some of these things. You need to remember and be self-confident that you are prepared. And sometimes people do it just because they don't know better, right? So that's my little confession plus anecdote.
Thank you. But what happened when you went back with your female colleague?
Guess what? He had to talk to me, because before I left the second time, and I used another strategy, I went outside and I found women that were coming back from the field. And I made sure I told them who I was and why was I there, because I could never finish my story. I was there for what was meant to be a win-win partnership. So he needed to understand that the decision was, I was the one making the decision. So I spread the word, hoping that probably this woman will go back home, tell their husbands, and at some point, the story will come back to the chief. And then I left, and then I went back with the other woman. He had no choice but to talk to me, right?
Thank you, Madelka. Alejandra, how about yourself?
Well, how do I choose? I have so many, some good ones, some not that good ones. But one thing that still happens to me all the time, and I think it has evolved, and I've learned a lot about that, is that when we came to the States 6 years ago, my husband was working over there in Chile. He had a pretty good job over there. He quit it because of us coming to our new project, our new family and our new life project. And every time that we were meeting new people, we were on kind of chilling out and talking with somebody new. We were asking like, what do you do? Like the small talk that you always have. And everybody was kind of talking maybe to me, and all of a sudden they switched to my husband and asked them the question, where did you come from? Where do you work? Or what's the reason you're in the States? And my husband was like, why are you asking me? I mean, it's because of her. And people was so uncomfortable. And I can tell you that they didn't know what to say, because this was men and also women. And they were like, oh, okay. And okay, should I ask her now? What do you do? Okay, I have to. So what do you do? Oh, I work for a company. And oh, interesting. And then they changed the subject. Are you planning to work? To my husband. And he was like, no, I'm really happy saying I'm home. She's paying all the bills. But people were like, they didn't know how to react. And this has always happened to me. I mean, I can tell you that every time that I meet new people, the question, it's pretty much the same. And at the beginning, it really kind of hurt me. It was like telling my husband, like, why they were talking to me eye to eye, and now they switch to you. And he has supported me a lot in that. And he said, like, don't let that affect you, use that on your favor. And now I make jokes to people like, yeah, he's the one, I'm paying all the bills, he's the one staying home, he's the dad of the relationship and all that. So I switch the approach in a way that it doesn't hurt me anymore. And I also try to teach the person, whoever is asking me, to first feel comfortable, because I want them to. But then to try to understand that there is another possibility, that it's not just the men who are making those calls and coming to the States or working overseas. So
Thank you, Alejandra. LA?
I was thinking, because there are a lot of stories, but two very short, quick ones. So I think it must have been like the year 2004 or 5. So when I was in the early years of my career at the Heat, we were doing an event at a school somewhere in Kendall, and we were in the auditorium, and I was there with a contingent of front office people. And I remember a couple of, I don't know if they were workers from the school, but they were men from the school. And they said, oh, we're so happy to have you here. Are you one of the dancers? Which on the one hand, I was like, well, I think
Might be flattering.
I think that's a compliment. But on the other hand, I was like, no, I'm actually the advertising manager or whatever. So it just goes to show the kind of stereotype that women don't work or don't belong in men's sports. What I will say, more recently, before the pandemic, it was I think 2019. And I realized that I was in my boss's office with a bunch of other folks from marketing, and I was the only woman in the room. And I think there were like 6 or 7 men in the room. And before the meeting got started, I went outside and I told one of my coworkers, take a picture of this. And she's like, what are you talking about? I said, take a picture. So she has a picture of me sitting on a bench surrounded by all these men. And that was very intentional, because when I said I speak to college students and high school students. I use that as a slide to be like, it's the year 2019. And I was the only woman in the room, still in the year 2019. So young ladies, if you're considering a career in sports, do not be, let that inspire you. In other words, let that motivate you, because we have to change that.
Thank you for that. And what comes to mind with that is, I think for these 3 stories are very inspiring. These experiences will make you stronger, but inevitably they hurt at some point when they're not the nice stories that we all like to share. And this morning in the 2 sessions that we had, there was this theme that came up consistently, which was our imposter syndrome, right? We don't think we're enough. We don't go for the same jobs because we don't think we have the credibility for that. How do you manage that? How did you manage that in your career? How do you manage it today if that still happens at some level? Maybe we'll start with you, LA.
But still contend with that. I'm sitting on a panel with 2 superstars like this. I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? I brought 2 of my colleagues who are sitting back there, and one of them is Bretsky, who's my mentee, and we talk a lot about public speaking and whatnot. And one of the reasons I invited him here is I said, I want you to debrief me after, as far as how I did with my public speaking. But I think personally, it's finding someone whose opinion you really trust, someone who will tell you the truth and have that person be like your hype man or hype woman. That I have found helps me. One of them is one of the folks on my team. He's like my right hand. I will go to him and say, here's what I'm dealing with, or I'm having a bout of imposter syndrome, and he will, you're this and this and this, and you've done this and this and this. And it's a constant battle, I think. I'm still not at the place where I'm like, oh, I completely deserve to be here, which is a disservice to me, I think, and to all the years of hard work. But that's a tough one to overcome, if I'm completely candid and honest.
Thank you for that. Marilka?
I turn it around. I think we all, no, but it's similar. It's similar to you. It's similar to what you do. I told you how, I feel like I prepare. And then we walk in and you're like, oh my God, am I prepared? And yeah, but in certain contexts, we have all experienced you're in a room and then, oh my, should I say this? What will happen if I open my mouth? There are so many men here. And then I realized something. I mean, every time I do say something, things go fine. I'm a woman, it's appreciated. And whenever I feel I do feel the imposter syndrome, I turn it around and I say, well, this is a humility moment. Like, it's a moment to remind me that it doesn't matter how much I prepare, I don't know it all. I need to keep learning. So I leave that room and I go back to one of my mentors in this case. I go back to other people. I go back to my family, my sisters, they're both psychologists, so I love them. Turn around when I grew up, right? My relationship with them. But I do try to turn them around and say, this is a moment and an opportunity for me to feel uncomfortable and continue to learn, as opposed to feel that I'm not necessarily enough, because after all the work you've done, if we knew it all, right, there will be no chance for growth. So I guess those little moments are reminders that even though we're doing a great job, we still need to pause and seek out more, and learn more from other people. That's how I turn it around.
Thank you.
Yeah, for me, and it still happens. I think it's something you learn to live with and how to control it. But I think it always happens. For me, it's a matter of you always try to check all the boxes, and sometimes you cannot check them all. I mean, if you are applying for a position and you see what they are requiring as a woman, you try to see all the ones. If you doubt in one, maybe I won't apply. But if you ask a man, probably they read the first two and they apply immediately and they are 100% sure that they'll outperform. So we need to do that a little bit more. I think we always try to be the perfect woman, the perfect wife, the perfect daughter, and the perfect employee, and we cannot fulfill all those stereotypes as well. And I think it's very honest to also talk to your teams or your peers and say that you are a woman, you are having a bad day, that you might make mistakes, that you don't have all the answers for everything, but together as a team, you can solve pretty much everything. So I remember I also have a mentor, it's a man. And I remember once I was very doubtful about a position or about a challenge. I remember talking with him and he was like, okay, let's remove you for a second. I'll put you in a different situation. And he started telling me a story, like he deviated from the subject a lot. So I was kind of very confused about where he was going. But all of a sudden, he asked me a question. I said, yeah, of course. And he said, well, the person or the situation that I described, it was you. And you were doubting. And now that I put it in a different way, you are 100% sure that that person can do it. So I think that was a very good example to try to remove yourself sometimes for the situation and be very objective about it and take risks. Sometimes you'll be good. Sometimes you'll make mistakes, but it's always another chance to make it right.
Opportunity for growth. Thank you for that. I have one for you, LA. Another one for you. You mentioned at the beginning, you've been working at the NBA for over 20 years. First, did you always want to work in the NBA? That's a curiosity I have. Always?
No, because I didn't realize that there were front office jobs. No, I really kind of fell into it, which pisses people off because it's a super hyper competitive industry. So when I tell them I kind of just like stumbled upon it when I lived in Los Angeles, back in those days, pre-internet days or very, very nascent days of the internet, companies were still putting ads in newspapers, right, in the classifieds. And I saw an ad that said marketing assistant LA Clippers. And I thought, that seems kind of fun, working for a basketball team, why not? So the long story short is it almost didn't happen because when I got to their building, when I got to the facility and I walked into the lobby, there were like 5 or 6 people there. And I thought, oh, they're really hiring, right? We were all there for the same job. And they interviewed us all as a panel, which was just really unnerving because I hadn't prepared for that. And it just felt like a psychological ambush. But I'm like, no, Lorianne, the universe is testing you right now. You need to follow through with this. And I'm glad I did because I'm sitting here today because of that. But no, I didn't always want to work here, but I feel like I, in some way, ended up here because this is where I belong.
Yeah, the serendipity of it, which goes to the actual question I wanted to ask you, which is, how has your experience as a woman changed over the past 20 odd years that you've been working for the NBA?
Oh my God, there are definitely more women and more minorities in the room. We at the Heat always like to say that, we are Miami and Miami is us. And we do our community a disservice if our company doesn't look like the community that we serve. So again, from the top on down, from ownership and executive management all the way down, like everyone really understands this. And always has, by the way. This is nothing new. Again, there's still work to be done. But I am proud to work for an organization where that is a top priority. And again, it always can be refined or improved. How has it changed? Besides those two things, I'll just stop right there. I'll stop right there while I ruminate a little more about it.
And we'll come back. We'll come back. And for you, you mentioned, so you started working in your home country, Panama, and you've come to have this very important role. You sit on multiple boards in your company. You've been around the world. And at some point when we were prepping for this conversation, you mentioned that at one point you thought your background could actually hinder or become an obstacle for you in your career. So what I'd like to know is how did you manage that? Because clearly you have become very successful and impactful and inspiring. And what drives that in you to overcome the challenges that you said you had once? Bit of a loaded question. Sorry.
Yeah, right. I wanted to work for the NBA. I always wanted to work for the NBA. Maybe that's easier to answer. No, it's a little bit what I said before, right? If you start thinking, you ask yourself, like, who I am, what are the opportunities that could be provided for me? And then you come from this country in Panama, and then you start working outside, and then you start seeing, you go to interviews and you're competing with people that are from probably that same country. And then you're like, oh my God, the imposter syndrome comes in. This is like a wrap-up question because all the things that we've discussed are going to come into this answer. But then you slowly start realizing what Cameroon told me. You have to just be yourself. You have a strong foundation. You can't be her. You can't be her. You can't be a man. You just have to be yourself. You're gonna have to appreciate who you are, your uniqueness, and just go with that. Then once you decide to go with that, because once I decided to go with that, because I've been, I would say, at least for me, successful to some extent, I feel responsible also, right? And that's what drives me. I feel responsible to bring along other people and young professionals as well. I've been extremely lucky with the bosses that I've had, the mentors that I've found, the men in my life, the women in my life. So if you are blessed with that, I guess the minimum that you could do, again, I'm very concerned about the impact that I have with people around me, is to try to do something and help other people. So ever since I joined AES, I guess, and even before, I've been the strongest advocate for hardworking women, hardworking young professionals. And I've been also advocating for more spaces where we could have, I mean, this type of conversation. I am obsessed with it. I counted, they're like, you were the last one to come in, probably 19 men in this room. Your mentee, I think it's right. You're 19 men in this room. So I'm really obsessed about, how many people are here. Are we going to have an impact? The day we get to 50%, then 50% men, 50% women, then probably we're getting, a little bit further. But really embracing diversity, and it's all type of diversity. And in my case, I know my three main traits, and I live happily with it, to the point that you don't see color, you don't see gender, you don't see nationality, you're just yourself.
See the person.
You see the person, yeah.
Thank you for that. Alejandra, when we met, you shared that you have been the first in many different circumstances in your professional career. And what surprised me was that I thought that that was a good thing, but then I learned that sometimes it's not a good thing to be the first in many ways. So what I would like to ask you is, in your industry and as a female leader, what can be done to open more doors for more female leaders to grow within the different companies that are represented here, and also for our Young Professionals Association that's joining us?
Yeah, well, I think that I would say that my dream would be that this wouldn't be a topic at all. So yeah, and I've been the first woman engineer, maybe the first MD, the first woman leader, and I don't see that as a good thing, as you just said. I think that I would love to be just one of many. I mean, there should be thousands of women engineers, whoever wants to be one, or MDs or whatsoever. So I think that at that point, I would really call it success. I was reading the other day the World Economic Forum, and the gender gap. It's between men and women. It would take us to close it around 151 years. So it's a long time. I want my next generation to have a different life and not wait 151 years. And actually, before COVID, it was a little bit less. So we're worst in that respect. So how do we do that? I think it's having these conversations, making sure that the people who's making the decisions are aware of all of this. I cannot stress enough having the allies and people kind of who makes those decisions, being aware of the situation and try to fix it. I think that leadership needs to understand that there is an extra effort, but the outcome would be much better if we invest in this type of things.
Thank you for that. We have just the right amount of time for one wrap-up question. So if you'll indulge me, will you go back to the beginning of your career and you see yourselves applying for your first jobs? If you were be able to give yourself some advice of the LA from back then, the Madelka from back then, the Alejandra from back then, what would that advice be? First question. And the second one, specifically for male-dominated organizations, any tips, any bit of advice for us to close our conversation? Who would like to start? Alejandra wants to start.
I can go first. Yeah, I think that the answer is very similar on both questions. I would say like three main things. First, to set up ambitious goals. The second one is to tell your boss or the people you work with about those goals. Picture yourself where you want to be in 5-10 years and tell your boss that. If you want to take his position or her position, tell him, like, I want to be there. I want to be you in 5 years. Respectively, of course. And then I think it's important to take risks. I mean, things are not going to come. You need to see the opportunities when they are there. And sometimes you just need to take them without all the answers, without all the checklist marked. I think it's important to take those risks. And the only difference between probably your question in my answer would be, from a male-dominated environment, it would be to be yourself, kind of be authentic and value yourself as a woman and make the most of it.
Thank you, Alejandra. Madelka?
I think I would say, for your first question, don't be afraid of the unknown, right? New experiences, be curious. That has been key, at least for me. So I think I will repeat that because it could bring you to wonderful places, places that probably you never contemplated before. And the other thing that I would say, and this is for your first and your second question, is early on, just let's try to find what our superpower is. We all have a superpower. And then when you don't know what your superpower is, then sometimes you can't find what makes you special in a room, what's your added value. So spend time with yourself, talking to yourself even, trying to identify what that superpower is.
Thank you, Mike. LA?
So fun fact, my mom worked for Greenberg for 24 years. She retired in 2020, but it was listening to mom, probably young Lorianne, listen to your mother who said all of those visits to the School of Hard Knocks, all of those times you get knocked down, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. And those things build character. And you know what? It turned out to be very true. So my advice to my younger self would have probably been, girl, stop worrying. It's all going to work out. In terms of young professionals, what these two ladies said, right on the money. What I would add to that is be brave and be bold, which is hard to do, I think, when you're embarking on your career. But if you make a mistake, so what? We all make them. We're all only human. You know, builds character. See, works in a professional setting too. And also don't be afraid to reach out to people, especially now in the information age and the age of social media. I can't tell you how many young women, especially who were looking to break into the sports industry, would reach out to me through LinkedIn. You know, they would want to make the connection. They would want to ask me about my career. One of those actually now works at the Heat. It was because it just started with her, you know, connecting with me and asking questions. So maybe aggressive is the wrong word, but assertively seek out those opportunities, the people who are in the industries, you know, or industry that you want to be in, like try and connect with those people, shadow them if that's an opportunity, ask questions, you know, be a sponge.
Be a sponge. It's a great line to end our panel. Thank you, LA. Thank you, Malevka. Thank you, Alejandra, for joining us. Please have a round of applause for our panelists.
Gabriel, LA, Madelka, Alejandra, thank you. This is very difficult for us to follow. I don't know how we're going to do that, but Reina, you want to come up? Thank you. I think you're going to have some added applications to work at the Heat.